as you look at your season, you plan practices, you're trying to divvy up what we should work on and when we should work on it. That is the art of coaching, is knowing when to do what, right? Because there's a million things that you have to do throughout the course of the season, or at least it feels that way. We got to prepare for zone. We got to put these baseline out of bounds plays in. We got to, this team's going to 1-3-1 us. We weren't good at this last night. So how do we decide when we're going to do what we're going to do? My biggest tip to coaches would be focus more on how you do what you do rather than just what you do. A lot of coaches are just like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do at practice? What are we going to run offensively or defensively? What's way more important is how you do what you do. So if you want to improve, you mentioned teaching, which I loved, is like, be a better teacher. First tip. So this may sound obvious, but I do think it's blind spot for a lot of coaches. First tip, focus on shot selection. The more I watch teams, they will say, Coach, we're really struggling offensively. And they're either doing one of two things. They're taking a shot after the first domino falls, meaning I pass to Tony, he comes off of a screen or some kind of cut, and he's got an okay advantage, and he's taking that shot. Great teams find the big advantage. So here's the easiest way to improve shot selection, because I know that's fairly broad term. Eliminate the bad shots. When we're trying to raise effective field goal percentage, we'll think, all right, we got to develop better players, right? Tony's got to shoot the ball better. Mark's got to finish better at the rim. Those things might be true, but those are like marathon goals. We're always working on skill development, and we're going to get more skilled over time. Skill is not going to happen tomorrow. You need to learn anything. You need action, struggle, and patience. Patience is often the hardest part of acquiring skill, sticking with it. So if we want to get better tomorrow, better offensive team tomorrow is going to eliminate bad shots that they take. Those are your so-so finishing layups, kind of shots in the paint, but also your so-so threes that are somewhat contested. The more teams I watch, the more small advantage threes that I see teams taking. And then also another way to improve your shot selection would be eliminate who's taking those shots with role clarification. I think a lot of coaches avoid those conversations. We watch film and it's like, we just don't want Mark taking those shots. Well, we got to tell Mark that. And the way we frame that is really important. Give him or her another solution other than shooting the ball. Hey, when you get here, if this happens, then we want you to get into this action. That was first tip. Second tip is related. Then I'll give you a chance to add your 2 cents. That's always welcomed and really good. I mentioned we take a shot after like the first domino that falls. So dominoes equals advantage game. If you embrace conceptual offense, it means you're embracing that there are 2 phases of the game. There's advantage and neutral. Most coaches spend their time on the neutral phase. I was just working with a team, spent 3 days with them, and the first day I just observed the practice, 100% of their practice was dedicated to neutral offense, meaning no one has an advantage. We've got to run a set play or some kind of action to create the advantage. Plays usually lend to shots. All 5 players do a job, and we get this shot. Oftentimes, that's a so-so shot. So we would embrace more actions to create advantage. And it doesn't matter what you run, you're going to get advantage, whether you arrive with it in transition, whether we set a ball screen, whether we set a pin down, whatever it is. Can we find and finish advantages? I would spend way more time there because the game is going to be in that phase more than it is the neutral phase. I was watching film of a team that I consult with yesterday. He was saying, hey, we're struggling to create advantages. I watched 5 possessions. In the first 5 possessions, they created an advantage on every single possession, but it ended there. Small advantage, stop, neutral. So we could not get that second and third domino to fall. When we work dominoes, it's a great way to work shot selection. It's kind of why I coupled those two. Give offense an advantage. That's going to work your defense, rotations, all that good stuff. But it's also going to give you a really good tool in order to get a lot of shots, grade those shots, measure those shots, and start teaching shot selection. I'll give you one more on shot selection. Have a system, not just good shot, bad shot. Yeah. Number system. We have a SAVI shot scale. I've used small advantage, big advantage, neutral in the past. I've seen 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. More, again, how you do what you do. Have a system so you're speaking a common language.
We had the advantage last year of having an older veteran team, and I think that I actually got a little bit lazy in my coaching because I didn't have to address those things. But now going through with a group that is in large part new has forced me to rethink about these things, and I'm facing exactly what you're saying. Starting, and this was intentional because I knew this was going to be a problem or challenge just because they don't know yet, taking our shots and using that numbered system has made it very clear in their minds and in ours. They don't really think much about it at the beginning, but if you continue to reinforce it, and we do that through some drills and we score things according to the shot that they take, according to our number system, it really becomes cemented in their minds. But then you talked about, especially early on with the younger team, they are content to settle for the small advantage shot. And something that I would encourage coaches, I think these go hand in hand, but I hope that somebody out there that's listening doesn't misunderstand me. What I found was 3 years ago when we had a younger team, I had to track sides of the floor and paint touches because that typically resulted in, if we went one side, maybe two side, we were settling for shots. But when we were going 3-4 sides, multiple paint touches, we were getting big advantage shots, which anybody that knows any of the stats know that makes sense. Last year I didn't have to. We had a guy that he tracked those for us. And after about 1 or 2 games, I said, Coach, I don't need you to track this anymore because our team just does this. But we had a veteran team. Fast forward to this year, after about the first 2 games, I was like, Coach, I need you to track this again because I don't think that we're getting okay shots, but they're not big advantage or great shots that I think that if we'd have just crossed the midline one more time, we'd have gotten an even better shot. And already after the last about 2 games of tracking this and emphasizing it in practice, we are getting better shots. And I just think that I mentioned that because I think that's one of those things that we talk about, what can you track? And for some teams, tracking certain things is important. For other teams that you have, they're not as important. And this is one of those things that has helped with our shot selection and them understanding shot selection. And then just real quick, the second one, because I do think they go hand in hand as well. I've observed some teams, some Division I teams even, that I have learned to understand that the pace you talking about, like us just doing it, the pace in which they execute helps create those advantages. And they're less concerned sometimes about the fine details. You talked about this on the last show. They're less concerned about that because they can go back and refine those things later on. But if they don't have the pace, it's much harder to get your team to then play with the pace that will then generate you the big advantage shots.
To be at their best, your team needs you. In basketball, any moment can be a coachable moment. Elevate your team's basketball IQ this season with GameChanger Film Room, one of many free coaches tools. For games filmed on iOS devices, Film Room automatically skips downtime from game film like halftime and timeouts, so you can save time and focus on active play. On any device, you can review gameplay and mark those teachable moments. Share these clips with your team and add in your notes. Provide helpful feedback that you can even reference at practice. Film Room lets you focus on the moments that matter and keep your team improving all season long. Turn practice plans into game plans. Take your team to the next level with Film Room from GameChanger Basketball.
You stole a little bit of my thunder with that last one, but no, all good. So much of what you said was really, really good. I was actually taking some notes as you were saying that. So you said veteran team, now not as an experienced team, right? It goes back to like, these are things we have to learn every year as a coach, right? Because every year is so different. It's like you go 6 months of coaching a team and it's like, oh, these things aren't as important or don't have to be measured. Like you said, one, I love your flexibility and like, hey, we don't have to measure this because like we're checking the box every single time, right? Yeah. I love how you were flexible in what you were tracking. I find a lot of coaches will start tracking something at the beginning of the year. It has really no value. They don't look at it. And it's like, well, I don't want to stop tracking it. I don't want to go backwards, but so kudos to you on that. Here's my next tip, and I'll tie it into what you said. Know what you're measuring. Okay. So know what you're looking at. The same group that I just spent time with, I spent 3 days with them. Their coaching staff knew exactly what they were looking at. And that sounds simple, but if you asked your assistant coaches, like watch a possession, hey coach, what did you see? hey, coach, what did you see? Right? You're probably going to get 3 or 4 different answers. You're seeing the same things, but your lens is a little different. Here's how to shape the lens. Know what you're going to measure by creating a checklist. So on your checklist was sides of the floor and paint touches. So we knew exactly what was important and how that led to good shots. If we move the ball, we move the defense, whether that is moving it around sides of the floor or moving it through the defense, getting paint touches. We knew that led to bigger advantages. So whenever I'm watching film, or let's say we were watching films of your team, we have a checklist of these are the things that are important rather than just like watching a movie, right? And every possession being evaluated different of like, oh, we're not cutting hard, or man, our pace wasn't great there. Like, know exactly what's important for our offensive system or defense or transition. I have a transition checklist. The very first one is get the ball out of the net quickly. A lot of times that's the issue. A lot of coaches will say like, gosh, we're not playing as fast as I, would like. And it's like, well, I see one thing that would really help us. We're not getting the ball out the net fast enough. Your guys or girls are running hard. We're pitching ahead. Our vision's good, but just the ball's not getting out. So creating that checklist, you'll know what to measure, and then you know exactly what you can focus on, and that's how you improve immediately. That would become a sprint goal. All right. So we're not getting the ball out of the net quickly, or we're not getting ball on multiple sides of the floor. We're going to hammer this for 1 or 2 days, and we're going to see instant improvement because we're going to be very targeted in our approach, which goes to the one that you kind of stole the thunder on a little bit, which is good because it means we're aligned, right? You mentioned pace. I had run your actions faster. Speed is way more important than read. So if you're thinking a split, just get to your screen faster, violently cut out of your split. Ball screen, encourage your ball screeners to arrive alone. I heard every screen should be an ambush. I love that. So how can we make our ball screens more effective? Yeah, we could teach some like ball screen reads. Again, that's going to take time. That's more marathon goal of like throughout the season, we're going to improve how we punish people in the ball screen. But what can improve today? How fast we get to the ball screen. Or no matter what you're running, if you're running a pass and cut offense, let's cut harder and let's get good at that today and tomorrow. If we're running just, any type of off ball screening, there's 3 ways to put pressure on the rim: driving the ball, cutting, and screening. So however you're doing that, just do it faster. Speed, way more important than read. And then here's a way to get better immediately too with ball screens, because everybody runs ball screens. Oftentimes we spend our time on punishing the coverage. So if they're going to be in drop, then we have this. If they're going to be in ice, then we have this. What if we changed our lens to preventing the coverage? So they're going to be in ice. So don't let them ice by doing this, rather than, okay, let's give them the first battle, right? They're going to win the first battle because, all right, we want to use the screen. They're going to ice us. So when they do ice us, we do that. Instead, it's like, okay, they want to ice. This is how we don't let them ice. This is how we make ice wrong or prevent ice from even happening. So think about, there's 2 buckets. We prevent and punish. Most coaches spend time on punishing. Let's go to preventing. So one actionable tip against ice would just be like flipping your angle of the ball screen, or slipping the ice into a short roll, which again goes to pace. Like whether you slip, roll, or pop, just do it harder. Let's get better at that immediately.
With the pace, I think one of the things that coaches will find, or maybe have encountered, when they go fast, the person a lot of time with the ball doesn't have enough time to make the decision and they miss things. But that's okay, because A, they'll get better at it if you continue to play fast. And B, when you're playing that fast, if you continue to play fast, there will be another advantage that comes right around the corner. And especially if you're at the high school level, who cares? Because most of you still are not playing with the shot clock. So you can just go right to the next thing. That'll change a little bit as more and more adopt. But I'm just telling you, as somebody who does play with a shot clock, when you continue to play fast throughout the possession, there is another advantage that's coming. That goes back to the triggers and stringing the actions together, which you can go back and listen to that episode at a later time.
Yeah. It also goes back to defense can't guard 2 things in a row.
Yes.
Right. What can defense do is like guard an action, get neutral, guard another action. But if we can, I call it stacking actions. If we can go action and it flows seamlessly to a second action, now we're in business. Because if we guard the first action, let's say it's the ball screen, right? One action that I like is like, all right, ball screen, instead of rolling or popping, our screener goes right into a pin down or just screens for the next player. the idea is that by guarding the first action, we're late to coverage for the second action. So it kind of goes into that like prevent or the action on the second one, right? Really, really good there. More specific or a more targeted approach. I'm going to give you two things that came to mind when I thought about this. Is like, how can we like really narrow our focus? Turnovers. We're all going to turn the ball over, but not all turnovers are created equally. There are the turnovers that are like, you know what, man, Tony just had like a really nice play there. If he just would have thrown that pass a half second earlier, okay, like we can live with those. I would look at turnovers based on two categories. Are they skill or decision? Meaning skill would be, we're traveling. Like we get a catch and we're trying to attack a closeout and we walk, or we're trying to drive and we're trying to stride stop and we travel. Tony is open and I just throw an off target pass, right? That's all skill. Decision would be a misread off a ball screen, right? Like I'm trying to hit the pocket pass and that obviously wasn't there. Misread. Or this play's not open, but I'm going to force a pass there. That's a decision. So if you know whether they're skill or decision, you know where to devote your time to. And then ball movement. This one came to mind actually as early as this morning. Was talking to a coach that I work with on ball movement. His team needs to move the ball better. And this has been something he's really been working with him in the off season, the preseason on. So my feedback was, okay, just saying move the ball or we need better ball movement, that might raise some awareness to it. But what if we just went super specific of let's get better at 2 outs, meaning 2 passes out of the paint, drive, kick, swing. That way they're hearing us saying 2 outs. And if we just focus on moving the ball better off a paint touch, maybe that translates to swinging the ball more, like you said, side to side. Or you could go the other way, is like, hey, let's just get the ball going side to side. And then maybe our 2 outs automatically get better because they're just become better at moving the ball. Or that just becomes the first step to improving our ball movement, right? Again, checklist. We need to move the ball better. Okay, let's see if we can get the ball moving side to side. And then once we do that, let's encourage them to go 2 out and so on.
I'm wondering if there is out there something better for us to be able to teach coaches and teach players in regards to pattern recognition. I think that basketball, whether it's how we're facing a press, how a defense is guarding a ball screen, how can we improve players' pattern recognition in regards to how defenses typically are going to play it? The reality is that most coaches are still defending a ball screen the exact same way. Most coaches are still teaching a press the exact same way. And I've just encountered this even here in the last 2 weeks. Take an example like a press, where the rotation is coming from, if it's a kind of a run and jump, where it's coming from, if it's because the reality is that most of them are going to look similar. And that idea of training the eyes, everybody is starting to understand that. But I just wonder, as a teacher and understanding my learners, how can I help them understand that better?
You said something really good, which would be train the eyes. How can we help them understand pattern recognition, recreate that pattern, and start with it? For instance, coaches will say, we need to really work on our like offensive rebounding or transition defense. Well, it's like, well, don't start neutral with your action or play or whatever. Start from a shot. So small advantage on the elbow. I would say offensive player, you have 1 dribble and you have to shoot. So we're either going to get a made or a missed shot, or get all of your offensive players around the perimeter, all your defense in the paint. Coach, throw the ball out. You have to catch and shoot. That way we're getting right to the pattern we want them to see immediately. So that would be one, is get there faster as far as what you're training. Second, you said train the eyes, and I would couple that with if-then statements. If you see this, then that. And that goes to just more principle-based teaching, right? Like we could say the answer to all this is it depends, or the answer to all this is spacing. The answer to all this is ball movement, but give them more targeted communication or feedback on if-then statements. So let's go 2 outs because we already talked about it. Drive, kick, swing, right? That is a pattern that we see in basketball all the time. Just if we get a paint touch, then we go 2 passes out, right? That would be a way for them to recognize a pattern.
Essentially, what you're saying is more breakdown drills, more small-sided games, so that then you could build out to the whole. We were facing a team that was pressing this week. So instead of just throwing a press out there and getting to it right away, we played it in a 3-man action. And then we added it to a fourth man action. And it was one of those where the inbounder went and doubled immediately, and then everybody rotated on the backside. So we added players over time so that the player could recognize it. Versus what I have seen some do, we have a team that presses really good. It seems like they're everywhere. Let's throw in 1 or 2 extra dudes to play 7-on-5. I'm going to really offend some coaches with this, but in my mind, that kind of goes contrary then to what I'm trying to do, because what's going to happen is that there are going to be rotations and defenders standing and coming from places where they don't come from in a game. So when I say I want to train the eyes, I'm actually not helping my players train the eyes, because they're not actually going to see what is going to really happen in a game.
Shame on you. I'm offended. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Okay. So to the coach that's saying, all right, well, I usually put 6 or 7 players out there to simulate the type of pressure. Here's a way we could help with that. Play 5-on-5, but add a constraint, or just change the objective of what your defense is trying to do. I would tell my defense, I don't care if they get a shot. Like, they can get 9s and 7s. Your only job is to turn them over or get a deflection. And then all of a sudden, your defensive intensity, it's going to feel more like that team that you're preparing for, because they're just playing with reckless abandon, which is what we're trying to create with the 6 or 7 players. But if you're telling your team, hey, play defense and jump to the ball and hedge ball screens, and then we need you to press to simulate our opponent too, like, just give them one thing. Deflections or turnovers. And I would even go a step further. That's the only way you get off of defense. So you have to play defense until you get a deflection or a turnover. That's going to bring that intensity level up, and it's going to give you a better game simulation. Here's my bonus one. If you don't like any of my ideas or the ones that you shared, that's okay. Pick something that is on your mind. There's probably something with your team where when you watch practice, you watch film, you're like, you know what? Gosh, we're just not good at that. We just don't understand that yet. Maybe a case in point, like the ball movement stuff, right? This year's team needs more of that. Resist the disease of more. Get the stuff on your list that's like, hey, we have to install this, we have to install that. Push that further down the road. And if it's bothering you now, it's not just going to magically get better. And you can likely improve on that stuff better because you've already taught it. You've already worked it. They have context to it. So if it's moving the ball, if it's going 2 out, if it's jumping to the ball defensively, whatever it is, you're at the point of your season where you want to start adding things. Don't. Just whatever's bothering you right now, let's make sure to address it. And you can get it done this week. And then you have all season to add all the cool stuff that Tony shares on Instagram and Twitter.
Awesome.